Have you ever been in a conversation in English and someone asks you a question and suddenly your mind goes completely blank? You know the answer, you have opinions, you have ideas, but in that moment, your brain says, nope, we're not doing this. And then you freeze. Today, I want to help you with one of the most practical fluency skills you can learn. This is for native and non-native English speakers. How to buy time while speaking English. Because here's the truth. Native speakers do not always answer immediately. Confident speakers do not always answer immediately. Even professional speakers do not always answer immediately. They use these little phrases to give themselves time to think. Phrases like, that's a good question. Let me think for a second. I have never thought about that before. These phrases are not just filler. They are fluency tools. They help you to stay calm, sound natural, and avoid freezing. If you're new here, hi, I'm Gabby, your English coach from Go Natural English. And today we're going to practice exactly what to say when you need a few extra seconds to think. So here's the problem. Freezing feels like failure, but it's not. It's normal. Let's talk about the real problem. Many people think fluency means answering quickly, speaking quickly. When someone asks you a question and you feel pressure to respond immediately, you pause, you panic, and you think, oh no, they think I don't understand. They think my English is bad. They're waiting. I have to say something right now. And that pressure and anxiety and stress makes it even harder to speak. And this is what I call the fluency freeze. Your English is there, but stress blocks it. Have you ever experienced this before? Maybe you look back at an experience and you think, I knew what to say. Why didn't I just say it? But this happens most often in real-time conversations that matter, at work, in interviews, in meetings, at social events, on phone calls, or even when someone casually asks, what do you think? That question sounds simple, but it can feel huge. So today, I want you to remember this. A pause is not a problem. Silence is not failure. You just need language to hold the conversation while your brain catches up. Because you're also thinking in English, right? Well, that's another topic. But this is what native speakers do all the time. And in fact, when you use these phrases that I'll share with you today and we'll practice together, you will be able to think more in English. You know, native speakers don't always have the perfect answer ready spontaneously in any situation. They just know how to stay in the conversation, to hold their place, to let people know that, hey, I'm still speaking here. And that is what we're practicing today. So here's the core solution. Use a thinking phrase first before you answer. The first solution is simple. So before you answer the question, use a thinking phrase. A thinking phrase is a short expression that gives you time. It tells the other person, I heard you, I'm thinking, I'm still with you, I'm not ignoring the question. And here's the most useful phrase. You don't use any of those phrases that I just said. Those are just thoughts that the other person might think. So here's our first phrase, and please practice along with me. Repeat after me. That's a good question. You can use this in almost any situation. At work, for example, what do you think we should do about this project? That's a good question. In an interview, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That's a good question. In deeper conversation, what made you decide to move here? That's a good question. This phrase does two things. First, it gives you a few seconds to think. And second, it makes the other person feel respected and heard because you're saying their question matters and you stay engaged in the conversation. So instead of panicking and saying nothing, start with, "That's a good question." Then breathe, then continue. You don't have to rush. You just have to stay connected. Just stay in the conversation. Now, here are some sample phrases to practice. 3 natural ways to buy time in a conversation and sound more fluent while you think in English. Let's learn 3 core phrases today. Number 1, "That's a good question." Use this when someone asks you something thoughtful, personal, professional, or a little difficult. Next, number 2, "Let me think for a second." Or if we say it a little faster, "Let me think for a second." This is very natural and conversational. You can use it when you truly need a moment. For example, what's the best way to explain this? Let me think for a second. Next, number 3, "I've never thought about that before." This one is excellent when the question surprises you. It tells the other person, "That's interesting. I need a moment to think." For example, do you think your personality changes when you speak English? I've never thought about that before. So notice something important. These phrases are not difficult. They're not advanced grammar. They're simple, but they're powerful tools to have in your fluency pocket because they help you manage the conversation. They help you stay in the conversation. And remember that fluency is not just about knowing grammar or words. It's about knowing what to say when real life happens, real conversations. And real conversations include unexpected questions. Now, let's combine everything that we've learned so far, what it sounds like naturally. We're going to combine these phrases into natural answers. Imagine someone asks, "What do you think is the biggest challenge of learning English?" A nervous answer might be, grammar, speaking, I don't know. That's okay, but it sounds unsure. And you want to sound confident. So now listen to a more natural, confident answer. "That's a good question. Let me think for a second. I'd say the biggest challenge is probably speaking in real time because you don't have much time to prepare." That sounds thoughtful, fluent, natural, not perfect, not complicated, just confident. Here's another example. The question is, "Why did you choose your career?" I've never thought about that before. I think I chose it because I wanted to help people, but I also like solving problems. Here's one more. The question is, "What do you like most about living in the United States?" Here's a sample answer. "That's a good question. I think what I like most is the variety. There's so many different cultures, foods, accents, and ways of life." So do you hear how the thinking phrase gives the answer a smoother beginning and gives you time to think? You don't jump straight into the answer. You ease into it. And this is very natural and makes you sound more confident in American English. Okay, so let's talk about how to make your answers sound even more fluent. We're building on what we've learned. So after your thinking phrase, like "that's a great question," you can add what's called a softener. A softener is a phrase that makes your answer sound less stiff and more natural. For example, "I guess," "I'd say," "to be honest," "for me personally," "off the top of my head," and the last one is really useful. I like this one a lot. "Off the top of my head." This means this is my first thought. Spontaneous. I have not prepared a perfect answer. For example, "That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'd say the biggest challenge is just staying consistent." Or, "Let me think for a second. For me personally, I think confidence matters more than perfect grammar." This is how natural speakers answer. They don't always state everything like a formal essay. They ease in, they give themselves room, and they sound human. So your formula is thinking phrase, softener, answer. For example, that's a good question. I'd say, or let me think for a second. For me personally, or I've never thought about that before, to be honest. And that makes you sound calm, confident, thoughtful, and fluent. Now, let's learn 5 phrasal verbs connected to buying time and handling pressure in conversation. Number 1, to come up with. To come up with. This means to think of an idea or an answer. For example, I need a second to come up with the right words. Next, number 2, to think through. This means to consider something carefully. For example, let me think through that for a moment. To think through. Next, number 3, to slow down. To slow down. This means to reduce speed or pressure. For example, I'm trying to slow down and answer clearly. I'm trying to slow down and answer clearly. Number 4, to catch up. This means your mind needs a moment to reach the conversation. For example, give me a second. My brain is catching up. This is casual and a little funny. Next, number 5, to jump in. To jump in. This means to start speaking quickly, often before you're fully ready. For example, I don't want to jump in too fast. Let me think for a second. These phrasal verbs are helpful because they describe what's happening in your brain during real conversations. You're trying to come up with words. You're thinking through the question. You're slowing down, your brain is catching up, and you don't want to jump in before you're ready. That is real fluency. Now let's add 5 useful phrases and vocabulary words. Number 1, a thoughtful question. A thoughtful question. This means a question that deserves a careful answer. For example, that's a thoughtful question. Next, number 2, on the spot. On the spot. This means without preparation. For example, it's hard to answer on the spot. It's very useful. Number 3, we have give me a second, or faster, give me a second. This is casual and natural. For example, give me a second, I'm trying to find the right word. Next, the right words. This means the best way to express your idea. For example, I know what I mean, but I'm looking for the right words. Next, number 5, I need a moment. I need a moment. This is polite and simple. For example, I need a moment to think about that. So now you have more than just one phrase. You can say, that's a thoughtful question. It's hard to answer on the spot. Give me a second. I'm looking for the right words. I need a moment. These phrases help you sound more natural instead of freezing and going silent. And the goal is to hold a conversation, to keep going. Not necessarily perfect or super advanced English, just connected English. So here's your fluency tip for today. A pause can make you sound more fluent, not less fluent. More confident, not less confident. And this may feel surprising because many people are afraid of pauses. They're afraid of silence. But in American English, thoughtful pauses are normal. And in fact, if you answer too quickly, especially in a professional situation, you might sound nervous or unprepared. But if you say, that's a good question, let me think for a second, and then pause, you sound thoughtful, you sound intentional, you sound like someone who takes the question seriously. The key is to not disappear into silence. Don't let go of the conversation or freeze up. Just say what's happening. Let me think for a second. I'm looking for the right words. I need a moment to think through that. Now the other person understands. They're not confused. They're not wondering if you understood. They know you're thinking. And this is such an important mindset shift. Fluency is not answering instantly or quickly. Fluency is staying present while you think in English. Now, here's a cultural communication tip. In many American conversations, especially at work, people often appreciate verbal signals. A verbal signal is when you say what you're doing in the conversation. For example, let me think for a second. This tells the listener, I'm not done. I'm not done talking. I'm still engaged. I'm preparing an answer. Please don't interrupt me. Without the signal, a long pause might feel awkward. Someone else might jump into the conversation, and all of a sudden you've lost your opportunity to answer. So you don't want that. With this signal, with this phrase, the pause feels normal and you will maintain your spot in the conversation. And this is especially helpful and important in meetings, interviews, and professional conversations. For example, in an interview, if someone asks, "Can you tell me about a time you handled conflict?" You don't need to panic, you don't need to freeze. You can say, "That's a good question. Let me think of a specific example." That sounds professional. Or in a meeting, what's your opinion on this? You can say, I need a moment to think through the details, but my first thought is, and that sounds smart. You're not avoiding the question, you're organizing an answer. In American professional culture, you can actually make yourself sound more thoughtful and more mature by using these phrases. Now it's time to practice. Repeat after me. That's a good question. That's a really good question. Let me think for a second. Let me think about that for a second. I've never thought about that before. I've never thought about that before. Give me a second. I'm looking for the right words. I need a moment to think through that. It's hard to answer on the spot. Now let's practice with a little more rhythm. That's a good question. Let me think for a second. I've never thought about that before. To be honest, I'd say, give me a second. I know what I want to say, but I'm looking for the right words. Beautiful. These are the kinds of phrases you want to practice out loud because when you're nervous, your mouth will use what it has practiced. It's muscle memory for your English fluency. Now let's practice full answers. Imagine someone asks, what's the hardest part of speaking English? Repeat after me. That's a good question. I'd say the hardest part is speaking in real time. Again, that's a good question. I'd say the hardest part is speaking in real time. Now another one. The question is, what do you want to improve this year? Repeat after me. Let me think for a second. I think I want to improve my confidence when I speak. Again, let me think for a second. I think I want to improve my confidence when I speak. Now another one. Question. Do you think mistakes are helpful? Repeat after me. I've never thought about that before. To be honest, I think mistakes are uncomfortable, but they help me grow. Again, I've never thought about that before. To be honest, I think mistakes are uncomfortable, but they help me grow. One more. Question. What makes a good communicator? Repeat. That's a thoughtful question. Off the top of my head, I'd say a good communicator listens well and explains ideas clearly. Excellent. This is how you train real-time fluency. You practice the beginning of the answer, not just the answer itself. Let me tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was speaking at an event, and after my talk, someone in the audience asked me a question. And honestly, I didn't know how to answer right away. I felt unprepared, but it was a good question. It was a little unexpected though. For a second, I felt that familiar feeling. My heart beat faster and my mind went blank. And I remember thinking, oh no, everyone is looking at me. And now this was in English, my native language. So I want you to understand, freezing does not only happen because of English. It happens because of pressure. It happens because we care. It happens because we want to sound smart, helpful, and clear. So instead of trying to force an answer immediately, I said, "That's a really good question. Let me think about that for a second." And I paused, I took a deep breath, and then I answered. And you know what? No one was upset. No one thought I sounded stupid. And actually, I think I sounded more thoughtful because I didn't rush. And that moment taught me something important. Sometimes the most confident thing you can do is slow down. Now, let's review the 3 main phrases for thinking in English. That's a good question. Let me think for a second. I've never thought about that before. Your 5 phrasal verbs are to come up with, which means to think of an idea, to think through, to consider carefully, to slow down, to reduce speed or pressure, to catch up, for your brain to reach the moment, to jump in, to start speaking quickly before you're ready. And your 5 phrases and vocabulary words are a thoughtful question, on the spot, give me a second, the right words, and I need a moment. Your fluency formula is thinking phrase plus a softener plus your answer. For example, that's a good question. I'd say, or let me think about that for a second. For me personally, I've never thought about that before, to be honest. Remember, you don't need to answer immediately or quickly to sound fluent. You need to stay in the conversation. That's the real skill. In the next episode, we're going to build on this skill because once you know how to buy time in English, you can think better in English. You can answer more honestly and naturally. The next episode is, honestly, I was nervous. How to talk about feelings in real situations. We're going deeper than I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm nervous. You'll learn how to say things like, I was a little nervous. I felt overwhelmed and I was caught off guard. We'll practice phrasal verbs like to open up, to calm down, to deal with, and more. Because real fluency is not just sharing facts, it's sharing how you actually feel. So today, your challenge is simple. The next time someone asks you a question in English and you feel pressure, don't freeze. Say, that's a good question. Let me think for a second. The one sentence can change the whole conversation. You've got this. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Gabby from Go Natural English, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.